Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Britton, and I want to say thank you for joining us today for coaching in the remote, virtual, and hybrid workspace. I'm the CEO and founder of Potentials Realized, and my guess is you might have met me before, probably through my writing. As some of you know, I wrote the world's first book on group coaching, which was published by Wiley way back in 2010. Over the last 18 years of my work, I've really been excited to see how not only coaching is scaling to both groups and teams, but certainly we all recognize how important it is to further strengthen our muscles and deepen the connections with those that we work with in the remote, virtual, and hybrid workspace. I am a passionate advocate for exceptional remote work. I started my career in the 1990s actually leading virtual, remote, and hybrid teams for organizations, including the United Nations. In most recent years, I've been able to present to many of you at ICF meetings, so it's great to be with you today in this format. And as you can expect, which is typical, we are going to get started with a bit of an activity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're going in our time today, but first want to invite you to lean into your screen and really get grounded for this session. We're going to talk about what does it mean to excel in this virtual, remote, and hybrid world. And part of this is about engagement. In my most recent writing, which is called Reconnecting Workspaces and the 90-Day Guide for Success, I've really become so attuned and write a lot more about the importance of visuals in this virtual and remote space. I want to give you 30 seconds right now to lean in and select an icon which represents how you want to be showing up for this call today. Yes, it's in part asynchronous and part synchronous, and our mindset plays a key role. So take 30 seconds right now, lean in, think about which one of these speaks to you. And once you've found that, I want you to grab a pen and a piece of paper or a device and a stylus and just make a note around which one you chose and what it represents for you. Please take a moment to do so. All right, that's about 30 seconds. I'm going to invite you, if you'd like, to share that in chat. Share that with yourself as well. I have chosen the one on the second line to sort of frame out our time together today. And if you look to the second row, I think it's, 4, 8, 9 in, it's the disco stance. And really want to say that hopefully we're having fun and we're activating some fun for the people that we're working with. As someone who has worked and operated in this space, I know that it just takes a few things to really move a call from meh to wow. That was a really good use of our time. So today's focus is going to be fourfold. I want to take you through what I call the hybrid and remote enablers. These are levers. These are things that we are actually able to dial up and dial back in terms of helping people thrive in this virtual, remote, and hybrid world. We're also going to look at the 5 engagement levers, which helps us to create more engaging, interactive, and memorable virtual conversations. Some of you joined me several years ago at an earlier ICF Converge conference where I spoke all about virtual conversations. This was way back in 2018. Can't tell you how many times in this last year I've received emails from folks saying, thank you for sharing that. And really, we do want to create memorability in our conversations. We also want to create connection. And so in this presentation today, I'm going to dive into what I call the 6 layers of connection needed in any virtual call to create the trust, safety, and connection. And like a triangle, it is a 3-part triad. Finally, we're going to wrap up looking at the unique needs of groups and teams in the virtual, remote, and hybrid space. And with team coaching and group coaching continue to blossom and continue to expand, I really hope that you'll get some very practical ideas that you can put into practice right away. So what's important about this topic? Well, as we know, March 2020, 3 billion people went digital or remote overnight. In fact, you might have met me on another asynchronous call back in March 2020 when ICF reached out to me and asked me to put together some videos to help coaches start to navigate into this remote and hybrid world. Back then, we didn't know, or most people weren't talking hybrid. We were just talking about remote work. So if you didn't see those, definitely check out the COVID-19 resources page. You'll find some other resourcing beyond today's call. Well, here we are, fall of 2024, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And recent studies have found that for many employees, as well as many businesses, remote work is here to stay much longer than we could have imagined way back in March 2020. A recent study by PwC found that 78% of CEOs agree that remote collaboration is here to stay. So whether we are working with individuals, whether we're working with leaders, individual contributors, whether we're working with groups or with teams, remote collaboration is key. And I hope that you'll get some ideas out of that today. So some of you also know that several months ago, back in August, I did a new TEDx Talks, and I hope that you'll check that out. It is called the Virtual, Remote, and Hybrid Checklist. And some of the topics get deepened today. So where I want to laser us into, though, is something known as the remote and hybrid enablers. And as we've seen from research, as we've seen from practice, there are many elements which are key to work. In fact, we just spotlighted this over at the Remote Pathways podcast, the podcast I've co-hosted now for more than 2 years on exceptional remote work. One of the things that I've really enjoyed seeing throughout my career leading teams and leading organizations has been the ingredients to high performance continues to be very, very similar. Some things are now magnified. In fact, most things have been magnified. Good practice, best practice has been magnified in this remote and hybrid space. And so almost a year and a half ago, more than a year and a half ago now, I started down the pathway of trying to identify what were those areas that I was having consistent conversations with my group and team coaching clients. Keeping in mind that for many years now, I've continued to work global. I support teams all over the world who really do not ever come together because of their geographic location. And what we've known for years is that these elements here that I'm going to share with you today are elements that take a team from that we're good into that space of we're great. Now, we're also going to add on 2 other elements, those being the hybrid enablers, because one thing that we didn't see last year was that probably workspaces would be reopening, thankfully, but at current moment, in many places, not everyone is back on site. So we're going to talk a little bit about what can you do when you have some people on site, some people off site. What do we do to create that exceptional connection between people in a hybrid workspace? So let's get started. And what I want to invite you to do, if you haven't grabbed it already, make sure that you do have your download, okay? One thing we know in the remote space is we retain information differently. So my hope is, one, that you'll remember how I started off this presentation today with the icons. That was in part to disrupt. But 2, I want to make sure that you're taking this away from the session. In the last year and a bit, I've introduced the remote and hybrid enablers to thousands of professionals, from leaders to teams to HR professionals. And what I find interesting is, regardless of culture, regardless of industry, these areas are key. These are all areas that we can influence. And my guess is that you as a coach are having conversations around these each and every day. So first, let me walk you through what the 7 C's are. As I go through this, I'd like you to think about what's important about each area in your work right now, and then how might you coach to those areas. I'm not going to dive into all 7. I will be diving into a few, but I think that you will find you have great tools already as a coach to be coaching in these arenas. So let's start at the top with Communication. And communication is critical in our realm. Think about all the different ways you communicate today. And my guess is it's a little different than pre-2020. So we are on Zoom, we are on Teams, we are on phone, we are live, we are in chat. And as it relates to the clients that we serve, chances are communication is likely to have gotten a little bit muddled. As we think about the remote world, we want to look at what are the channels we're on, what are the styles we employ, and what approaches do we use? What are we communicating and why are we communicating? As I like to say, Zoom fatigue really is real. And for those of us that have worked in the Zoom world for more than the last 18 months, have you also noticed how things have gotten a little bit heavier? So we do want to think about how we are helping our clients really navigate through what could be perceived as noise or could be perceived as weight. That may mean that we're supporting them in thinking about how are they listening? How are they asking better questions? We might also be looking at communication styles. And some of my favorite part of work over this last couple of years has been around helping teams really identify what it is that they need in order to communicate. In fact, it's what led to me develop a recent quiz called the Hybrid Work Style Quiz. You can find the link below. Definitely check it out if you're interested. But in my work, I've found that there really are many different styles of communication and very different styles of work. So if I'm a visionary, think about how I might be showing up into a conversation. I might be asking things like, what's possible? What's an option? What can we do? And that might be very different than my connector colleague, who in the same conversation is looking to connect the dots, looking to connect people, where he or she might be saying things like, how does that relate? How does that fit together? And then we might also have the builders on the team, people who are wanting to get results. And the builders might be, so what do we need to do in order to action that? They might also be saying things like, now what? Or what will you do? What are you responsible for doing? So in a remote world, it's really key, not only for us to be exploring this with our clients, but for our clients to be thinking about how does this relate with others? And that's just the first of 7 enablers. So think about the coaching tools you have available. Going hand in hand with communication, of course, is clarity. And we want to have clarity of a lot of different things. We want to have clarity of our expectations. We want to have clarity of our outcomes. And we also want to have clarity of purpose. A big part of clarity can involve intentionality. And think about how I started off today's call. I got you to lean in and look at the icons. How are we helping people get grounded? How are we supporting people to think about how they want to show up and what their presence is? Clarity, like many things, is about results, but it's also about relationships. So the intentionality or the being piece is key, but so is getting results. And so I want to share with you a quick facilitated process that can really help people gain clarity in terms of what they are able to do. So I'm going to just activate my annotation, and I'm grabbing my drawing tool here. And I just want to share with you, it's just a very simple T-chart. So we can have in a conversation, let's say I'm sitting down with a team and helping the team identify what actions they need to take around their key priority. What tends to happen in the remote space is we all bring our expectations. We all bring our assumptions, and those things are hidden under the waterline. Part of the role of coaching is to help, those things that are under the water become unearthed, to become visible. And so in creating clarity with the clients that we work with, we might actually pull out this is not tool. It's a facilitation tool, but it's going to help us further the coaching conversation. So again, let's level set. We've got a team. The team has got to get clear on this report that they have to create. And if I just said, okay, so when are you going to do it? What are you going to do? Who's responsible? We might have that conversation done in 30 seconds. What might happen, however, is that everyone goes off and starts doing something different, because in a remote space, we do start moving apart. As team coaches, we want to create alignment. And so in creating clarity, I might then pause the team and ask them to consider what helps them move forward with this report. Let's break it down a little bit further. Let's think about what this report is. And as we go around our room, virtually, of course, we might hear that this report is going to be five different case studies. It might involve 5 different photos. And it might also involve a showcase of all the different areas that this team is involved with. Of course, that number is also 5. What it is not, though, is it's not going to be an in-depth replacement for an annual report, okay? It's not going to be a video-based report. And it's not meant to supersede another piece of work that we're doing at the same time. So notice as we go through this, just as a team, we can start gaining certain clarity, and that helps us with our alignment. So think about you in your work right now. What is it that you can be doing to help your clients gain more clarity? Maybe it's using more of the being and that intentionality focus where we started today, or maybe it's about focusing more on results. In my work, high performance equals results and relationships. And that's something that you're going to be seeing really laid out in the new Reconnecting Workspaces book. So a third area I want to touch on of these 7 engagement levers is really culture. And culture, of course, is how do we do things here? In any coaching conversation, there are multiple layers of culture. We have our global and our meta layer of culture. We have industry culture and organizational culture. We have leadership culture, team culture, micro and personal culture. And of course, that's surrounded by our context, the geographic culture that we operate within. Multiple conversations can take place around helping people explore and connect the layers of culture. In my current writing with Reconnecting Workspaces, I really like to break it down because when we're meeting on Zoom, when we're meeting in a remote or a hybrid team, we're each bringing different layers. We're also very aware of some of these layers more than others. So as a coach, part of our role may be helping teams, individuals, and groups unlayer what is at play in each one of these layers of culture. And each one of these layers has their own physical representations as well. We may have mottos and mantras, things that we say about it. We may have icons and mascots. So culture is a very rich area. Certainly it is not one conversation. This may be something that plays out across conversations, but we need to be clear on where these reside in our work together. So far we've looked at communication, clarity, culture. Again, I'd like to invite you on your piece of paper or on your screen to really note down what's important and how do you coach to that. We're going to go into connection a little bit later on in today's presentation, but 3 more that I want to quickly mention: consistency, and that may be consistency of process, consistency of practice. We also want to make sure that we are activating community, because one thing that has become very aware of in this last 18 months is no person is an island. We do not operate alone. And as I've taken out this model to thousands of professionals, I often ask the question, which of these is most important for you? And so I'm going to ask that question right now for you. Which of these is most important for you? And I'd like you to share that with us. Which of these is most important for you? What's been interesting is over time, I've seen that some of these areas have shifted, but coming up time and time again near the top is community and collaboration. So think about what you're doing as a coach to activate community. As I started out in today's presentation, remote collaboration is here to stay. And many of these elements are what we need in order to collaborate fully. So with that, thank you for sharing. let's take note of where everyone is looking at. And this might be something that you revisit time and time again. So for now, our 7 remote enablers have been explored, but then we move to the hybrid world. So again, in the hybrid world, how we're defining this is some people are on site, maybe back in the office, some people may be off site. What is even more challenging in the hybrid space is really helping people continue to move in similar fashions. And so with that, we not only need to activate our intentionality as we did, but we also need to add a second component. So we no longer have the 7 C's, but we have the 7 C's plus an IV. Hopefully you'll remember the IV. I being intentionality and V being vision. So let's talk a little bit about vision. And you've got space at the bottom of page 1 of the handout to note what is important around working with vision. Of course, there are so many different ways we could work with vision. What is important with vision is it allows for us individually and collectively to have that line of sight, whether it's a horizon, whether it's a mountaintop, whatever the metaphor is, it provides a stable location. And when things are disrupted, as I shared recently in a Choice magazine article, when things are disrupted, vision becomes even more important. So vision is typically something we really learn about early on in our coaching career. As I've had the privilege of training thousands of coaches in the areas of group coaching for many, many years, I know that vision is something that we really want to lean into. So we may have lots of approaches that we can be using. Of course, we could be creating a vision board. We might also work with vision by getting people to look back a little so that they can look forward. And I want to stress that looking back to look forward does not mean that we're unearthing our history. It just means to do a quick, what worked well, what didn't work well, how can we use that to inform our future? Earlier today, I was working with a group in the Team Coaching Essentials program, and we were talking about a really sort of a foundational team coaching exercise, which is simply to ask team members to think about a time when they were at their best, when they were at their best in a team experience. And for a team, it can be really powerful for people, individual members, to talk about their own experiences. We bring our experiences each and every day. So in that best team example or best team exercise that many team coaches will be familiar with, we get people to lean into the qualities, characteristics, and behaviors of what happened on those exceptional teams. What happens when we look back at an exercise like best team is it gives us that sensation. It puts us back in touch with what's important. And in order to look forward, we can carry some of those messages along with us. So think about what you might do with a best team, with a best leader, with a best parent. Any of those could be great ways to warm up, as we like to say, warm up the emotional space to really be stepping forward into possibility. And I think that's a big piece with vision, right? It's not only like our vision is something that pulls us forward, but sometimes we want to make sure that it's anchored in what our experience has been. So that's number 2. Third way to work with vision could be by doing a guided visualization. And who doesn't love a guided visualization? I have to say, as a younger coach, this was a stretch area for me. And I loved being trained by CTI, Coaches Training Institute, whose future self visualization is something that I have used and continue to use with clients all over the world. I often get asked in my coach training, what are some good resources around visualization? I don't do it well, for example. So I like to always recommend Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain. And guided visualization is one approach of many that some people will really enjoy using. So think about guided visualization and how that might work well for you. Another approach for working with vision is, of course, creating a worksheet, taking people through a series of reflective prompts. I love doing this. Every November, I take people through an annual visioning session. I do this as well with teams. And so people have that one pager that they can lean into and work on and fill out as we go. Still a little small, you probably can't read that, but it's just one page that people can take away and put up like the vision board, making it really visual. A fifth way is creating a model. And again, back to the practice of team coaching, back to the practice as well of creating a structure around things that are important, which is important for all of us as coaches. We might create a model. So this is, again, these are figurines. You might have figurines, and there's lots of uses for that. But you might actually have your client or plural clients working with, everything from tinfoil to plasticine to little models to represent what their vision is. And again, key to this is creating that visual anchor that people can aspire to. A final working with vision piece that I wanted to bring forward today is a facilitated process I've become certified in, known as Draw Your Future. And why I include it here is because in the last year, I found that clients have really enjoyed being taken through a process where they look at where they were and where they're going and how that can be anchored in with some simple, bold steps. Draw Your Future is a process that was created by Patty Doblavsky, and she offers great certification programs. It's another way to look at vision as you go. So those are 6 ways. You would notice on your file that there were just 5. But please take a moment as we continue to move on to think about what you're doing right now to activate vision. All right. So all of this is in light, and as the office light streams in my office, creating engaging virtual conversations. So in creating engaging virtual conversations, we want to make sure that we're bringing people's voices in. And how do we do that? Well, my guess is you've got a lot of the basics down at this point in time, but there's probably even more that you could be activating. So we have chat, and it's my hope that today people are activating chat, that you're actually creating what I term the back chat. Virtual and remote work creates an exceptional playing field for bringing people together that we would never be able to put together in the same room. Think about all of our colleagues here today, right? Would this have been possible if we had physically met somewhere? My guess is it wouldn't have had the same dynamism. So when you have opportunity, think about how you could be using chat. Get that back chat going where people can share a resource, a tool, a tip, or an idea. And at the end of a presentation, if we're allowed, we can then save that chat and expand it out or send it out to everyone. This is a great way to crowdsource and to actually create collective knowledge base. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the room with amazing professionals, and we've actually left with a laundry list way longer than the speaker. And so as your speaker in this period of time, I do want to invite you to use that back chat with any resources that you enjoy around these 5 engagement levers. Now, you might notice on the screen that chat, I've also got the wow. You might be saying, what's a wow? Well, we want to create a wow every conversation, but we also want to look at how do we create a ways of working. For coaching, whether we're working one-on-one, group, or team, we want to make sure that we're co-designing what the conversation can look like. So what is going to go into that ways of working for you? Take a moment and think about how you could be using chat in your next Zoom call to activate it. The beauty of doing a ways of working and group agreements in chat is that it's then part of the chat log. Everyone can get a copy and it's immediately downloadable. All right, so that's engagement lever 1. Engagement lever 2, which we're not going to use today, but I think is a lot of fun, is of course polls. And in polling, we want to be able to see like who's interested in what. So think about how you might use that in your Zoom, and also think about how you might interface that through a Mentimeter or a Poll EV. A third one that you've seen me model today is annotation. And we do want to get people kinesthetically active on their screens. even if we can't get people up and physically moving around, how do we get them on their screens? So we've got a lot of great tools now in Zoom that you can interface on. Many of you will be aware that you can bring in your Miro, your mural apps, and that further heightens the interactivity factor in a virtual call. Another activator that we can use in the virtual space, of course, is your whiteboard. A whole series of techniques that we can be using on our whiteboard, but I want to spotlight just a couple. So number one, can we be using our whiteboard to co-design our roadmap of where we're going in the call? As a group coach, when I'm working with virtual groups, one of the early things that we do after our introductions and our ways of working is start to look at what's the roadmap. Where are we going in the 6 calls or the 8 calls or the 10 calls that we have together? And so whiteboard is a really valuable approach to just bringing voices onto the screen and visually seeing what's aligned and how we fit together. I'd like to invite you to think about how you can be using whiteboard more effectively. Finally, one of my favorites, which we're not using today, but I hope that you will use in your next call, breakouts. Breakouts are key. Now, not everyone loves them, but really coaching in particular is a conversation. And in larger groups and larger teams, we're usually not able to hear from everyone. So what can we be doing to activate breakouts? And a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, make sure breakouts are small enough. 5 people or less. Also, make sure that you're leaving enough time. Last week, I was leading a corporate session and we were able to do a series of 4 breakouts. The first 3 were 10 minutes in length. The last one was only 8 minutes. What do you think we heard in the main room? Why didn't you give us 10 minutes? We needed that last 2 minutes. So think about it. You know, the sign of a great conversation and the sign where people have gelled is when they want more time, where they just don't want to come back to the main room. And that's what I mean when I say creating engaging virtual conversations. In 2017, I published Effective Virtual Conversations, my 3rd book, now publishing book number 7. But in Effective Virtual Conversations, it's all about how do we create memorability? How do we create those moments where people go, wow, that was such a good use of my time. So with that, I'd like you to think about what you can be doing to activate these 5 engagement levers. What are the things that you want to make sure you are integrating in your next call? And of course, there will be a next call. So whether you're working one-on-one, whether you're working with groups or even teams, these are critical success factors. All right, so let us know, which one do you think you would like to be using more of? I will say that the one that I personally love to use more of is whiteboards. And think about yours. If you'd like, share that with us, because all of those levers give us a connection in with others. And in the virtual space, in the hybrid and remote space, we are not just focusing on one layer. We want to make sure that we're connecting people in multiple ways. So we first want to make sure that we're connecting people in to the topic at hand. Again, you're going to notice in your notebook or your worksheet that there's space for you to think about what strategies you can use to bring people or connect people to the topic at hand. In today's conversation, I showed you those icons. I could have started today's call with a visual of photographs, asking people to select the photograph that represented the topic for them. If we're not bringing people in that first, less than a minute, really sometimes it's even 15 or 30 seconds, people will disconnect. You've done it, I've done it. So what are you doing to signal you're here? And what's your connection to the topic at hand? This second layer here is we want to make sure that we are connecting people to each other, right? Calls and coaching is not about the coach. It's about our clients. And when we're coaching more than one person, as I wrote in my book, From One to Many, Best Practices for Group and Team Coaching, We want to connect people with each other. What are you doing to use those breakouts? What are you doing to find common ground? These are some of the several strategies that we want to be activating to help people connect with each other. Breakouts, voting, polling, etc. No person is an island. And so we do want to activate that sense of community that we talked about way back with the 7 remote enablers. I'd also like you to think about how can people connect with you as the coach? How do they get to know a little bit more about you? As you'll notice, I was sharing my image, the rock star, let's get a bit of disco in this. People want to know more about what's behind your screen. And that's a really key piece of this virtual space. So 3 more layers of connection as we keep on moving. And the next one is, of course, connecting in with content. Now, as coaches, we're not trainers. I do want to put this on the table. Any content should really come outside of the coaching conversation, maybe become a micro learning piece. Maybe you get people to watch a video or view a TED Talk or read an article before they come into the room. We want people in our coaching spaces to be in dialogue with each other. And that's a big piece where we want to use our engagement levers that I just covered to really use the best of the platform involved. Finally, the last layer of connection is how do we help people connect in and bring a little something in from their context? Much harder to do in this virtual space, especially when we have backgrounds that don't show where we're calling in from. So what that might mean is we need to use an exercise or an activity that makes it explicit. Several of you know one of my favorites, which is what's outside your window. So just for a moment, which will also give your eyes a rest, I want you to look to your nearest window. And I want you to look out and see one thing that is just a little different from what we've talked about so far. So one of the things I can notice outside of my window is that people are still cutting the grass. It's getting cooler here in Toronto, Canada, but people are still cutting the grass. So that's a very different world than, looking at our time together, talking about the virtual. What I love is that in the hybrid space and with mobility, we can actually bring the virtual and the physical together. If some of you have met me in the summer months in any of the programs and coach training that I run, I do a lot of work out of a beautiful part of the world called Muskoka, Canada. And so I'm in nature, I'm in the woods, I'm on the river, I'm in a canoe, I'm on the track, I'm in the forest. And because of mobility, in some locations, not all locations, but we are able to connect in that space. So context is key. And what are you doing to activate context? All right, we've just got a few more minutes left, so I want to keep on going and just want to invite you to think about with connection, how is that going to anchor in with the trust and safety? This past summer in my TED Talk, the virtual remote and hybrid checklist really wanted to bring to the wider world this notion that, trust and safety are not just two things. We really need this anchoring of trust, safety, and connection. As I look back at the last 18 years of being a coach and the last 3 decades of being a leader, I think one of the biggest challenges for people to thrive in this virtual, remote, and hybrid space is all about trust. If we don't know each other, it's hard to engage with each other. If I don't know what you're doing off the screen, I might be making up a lot of stories. So think about how you're working with trust, which goes hand in hand with safety. Many of us, of course, are well-versed and have done years of work, maybe following people like Amy Edmonston and her great writing and research around psychological safety. And the piece that I want to put on the table today is really this notion of connection. I hope that as we've moved through today, you've thought about how do we reconnect people? This, in fact, is why my latest writing is called Reconnecting Workspaces. There never has been a time where it's been more important for people to connect. And as I say in my TED Talk, it's not just because Zoom fatigue is real, and it's not just because the health impact of loneliness is significant, but it's because we need each other. So as we start rolling into the end part of this presentation, I want you to start thinking about how can you be building more trust within the teams that you work with? What are those behaviors that people can see on the screen and off the screen? And what are those things that are detracting from the conversation? Even visually, how you're being seen. And when you have the sunlight streaming through your window, how that may change the focus. Trust, safety, and connection are key. It's what builds an environment of respect, and it's what's needed for us to create a robust culture. In this space, we may need to be using skills like influence, because if we're not a leader, we need to work through others. So my invite as we go to wind down is to think about what are you doing to surface conversations around trust, to surface an exploration, and to most importantly, make sure that you're bringing all voices into the room. It's our collectivity that creates a robust culture in the virtual, remote, and hybrid space. As I shared at the start of this presentation, we probably are all bringing different things. So it can be useful to look at our different work styles, especially in the hybrid space. We may also want to be looking at our learning styles. Are you an auditory learner and you've been listening to the stories I've been telling? Or are you a visual learner, leaning in when I wrote out that is not table? Or maybe are you a kinesthetic learner who really appreciated being able to go to chat or lean in and create a story or take notes? We want to make sure that we bring all voices into the room to create a conversation. That's what we do as coaches. So as we go to wind up, you've been in calls and sessions time and time again. My hope is that you'll pull out one of my favorite coaching tools, which I published several years ago in Plan, Do, Track, known as the one-page plan. I'd like for you to just write down for yourself what are some of your next steps. It may be in this format, so write down your first next step, give it a description, put some key timelines on it, think about the resources, the who and what that you need, and then also think about the enablers, the things that are going to help you, as well as the derailers, the things that might get in the way. Coaching is about learning. Coaching is about action. And it's also about creating a pause so that we can move forward in a better way. My hope is that today, out of today's presentation, you've received some specific tools and ideas that are going to help you in your conversations, whether you're working one-on-one with a group or a team, whether you have people in the remote space or even people back in person. All of what we've talked about is useful. As we go to wrap up, I want to give you one more microburst, one more of these mini pauses, as I like to say, so that you can lean in and think about one of these questions. I'm going to just put the timer on for 30 seconds, and then I want to share with you a couple more resources, and then we'll be opening up the conversation. So lean in, 30 seconds. Which of these questions has most resonant, and answer it for yourself. The one I like to share is always what's possible. My guess is you've mastered a lot of these techniques and tools, but what's possible if you activate them even more? I hope that we'll connect after today's presentation. You can find all my information here. Today, I talked a little bit about the hybrid work quiz, and I'd love for you to try that out. So definitely find it at bit.ly/hybrid work quiz, or let's schedule a conversation. You can find me at calendly.com/Jen Britton. As always, it's a pleasure to get to connect in with our community. I hope that you're enjoying the conversation, and I look forward to hearing the questions that have emerged from today. So for those that are interested, here are several of the references that I've made throughout the presentation today. I started off with a PwC survey talking about how businesses can emerge stronger, and that's where you'll find some of the research around remote collaboration. And I've included some of my many books. I hope that you will pick up perhaps from one to many best practices for team and group coaching. I mentioned the hybrid work quiz, My latest 2 books, Reconnecting Workspaces, Pathways to Thrive, and the 90-Day Guide for Success. Over at the ICF COVID-19 page, you will be able to also download for all members the remote working white paper, which I produced last February 2020. It's been wonderful to spend time with you. Thank you again. And I look forward to the next time we get together for a conversation. Have a great day.